think with Michael Fields, the head of, I think it's a relatively new organization in Colorado doing great work, Colorado Rising Action. Michael, hey, once again, thank you for your time.
It's good to be back on with you guys.
So the Colorado Supreme Court must have been listening to our show last week when we had you on, talking about Governor Hickenlooper. I guess suddenly became aware at the end of his term here that there might be some conflict, at least in the eyes of some people, between Tabor and Gallagher, both designed essentially to protect taxpayers. Tried to do an end run around everything by asking the Colorado Supreme Court to
kind of do whatever they'd like to do.
Just
hey, can you kind of devise something where we get to spend a lot more? We can tax the people a lot more. Wouldn't you like to do that? But the Supreme Court, in a very short, kind of pithy one, said, "Nah, thanks, but no thanks.
We're not going to get involved."
So they have two things going. They first tried it vis-a-vis their two big spending measures on the ballot, both the one for roads and one for more money for education or public school teachers is really what it is. Both of them went down in flames. They tried the Supreme Court. Now they're going to have to try it the old-fashioned way through the state legislature to try to gin up something.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it was good news. I think we were talking about this last week and thought, the courts might come out a different way because typically they've come out against Tabor in a lot of cases. But,
right.
Governor Hickenlooper wanted to basically, rewrite Gallagher and Tabor. And the Supreme Court shot that down and said, no, you have to do it the old-fashioned way. You have to go through the legislature, back to the people. These have been on the books for over 26 years, and there's a process by which that you change them. And so it was really good news. I think, it's always scary when something goes to the judicial side of things because, you can vote legislators out. You can, have the people vote for something else on a ballot issue.
Right.
Once the court decides something, it is stuck. And it's really hard to change that. So we were happy with, the result that we saw. And it was surprising because 5 out of 7 of the Supreme Court justices were appointed by Governor Hickenlooper, and they said thanks but no thanks.
Yeah.
Well, then, so I talked with my Democratic friends this morning and say the hunt for the Red October is on. They've got to find the usual useful idiots over in the legislature to join with them.
Which won't be hard.
Which won't be hard because there are plenty of useful idiots there. They can get Jerry Sonnenberg to sign.
Well, you mean a Republican? They need a Republican.
Yeah, they need a Republican. Oh, they got all the Democrats, but the reason why they tried to put it on the ballot, the reason they tried to go to the Supreme Court is that that's the kind of thing that people get mad at. I mean, sort of like gun rights. But when all of a sudden they find their tax bills just skyrocketing, they kind of go, well, "Who did this to me?" And they kind of, "I know who did it to me."
It was the courts.
No, but it's the legislature. So there are a lot of there's some new guys over at the House who are easy who want to be happy and want to make everybody happy, and then there's some traditional ones like Jerry Sonnenberg over at the Senate that always want to make
these are Republicans you're talking about.
Yeah, oh yeah, well the Democrats are 100%, but they need some cover. So think they'll have much trouble finding some.
Well, I think this is the key time for conservatives to say, you know what. These legislators, if they ran on supporting Tabor, if they, talk like they're big supporters of taxpayers' Bill of Rights and having people vote on this stuff, then it's time to put their votes where their mouth is. And I think that's something that didn't happen in years past, that we just assumed that Republicans would stick to Tabor, that they would be fiscally conservative, and that wasn't the case. And so I think this is time when groups like us and other groups, really put pressure on legislators to say, make the case for why Tabor is important. Talk about that $2.4 billion that taxpayers saved by being able to vote on this stuff.
Yeah,
because if it went to the legislature, that stuff would have passed. And that's just in 1 year, $2.4 billion.
Wow.
So I think that this is when we have that discussion with those legislators and say that make this a main part of your, your stance, your platform. Talk about it because it's very popular with average Coloradans. And
Michael, let me back you up a little bit. And can you explain what we're talking about here? Tabor and Gallagher, how do they work and how did they save us all of that money?
Sure. So the main part of Tabor is that this reason why your ballot is as long as it is, but any tax increase that the legislature or localities are going to impose on us, we have to say yes or no. And we are able to hold government accountable and say you haven't been spending the current money you have wisely enough, or you have. And so that's the discussion that happens. It also limits the growth of government to inflation plus population. So the money's going up every year. Last year, our state budget went up $1.5 billion. And every year it goes up about $1 billion or more. And so they're getting more and more money, but TABOR makes it so that they have to go and ask us. On the Gallagher side, basically what happens in 1982, we passed an amendment, and it makes it so that property taxes are split between residential and commercial. Commercial 55, residential 45%. And so the question here is, because of TABOR, basically the other, one side of that equation can't go up, but the other side can go down. So a lot of localities end up over time having less money. The solution to it is to ask people for more money. If you have, a fire, if you want more money for fire, which I know Chuck has an opinion about that, but if you want more money for fire, then go and ask the people.
That's exactly. Did you see all the fire chiefs came out, and they were the ones who applied to Mr. Hickenlooper, asking them to please.
Well, that's a scam, though. I mean, because here's the thing: it's like the money would not necessarily go just to fire. What they're talking about is just overall increases. They just use fire because that sounds nice.
Well, and rural libraries, which are kind of redundant in the day of the internet, but we got to keep on pouring money into them. And so it's an interesting. They're always good at the con. They're always good at the con. But we've decided to help out the Republicans. On the Republican side, you have the Principles for Prosperity, and they give out awards every year for people who
Principles of Liberty,
and they give out awards to the top legislators that go to
they rate them basically.
Yeah, they rate them, but they give awards out at the end of the year, usually at the Western Conservative Summit. We have decided that we're going to hand out this year what we're calling the Sonnenberg Flake Award, in which the Republican who betrays his party, betrays his principle, and betrays everything he's purported to stand for, we're going to give him an official award. And it'll be a hotly contested one, kind of the red flag folks versus the people who want to get rid of TABOR, the people who want to kill babies. All of them will be fighting it out. We've got, we've already talked to some legislators to give us some names who they say early on they think will sell everybody out. So we'll be closely watching them. But it should be fun. It'll be a hotly contested one. I'm sure people will be calling and saying, no, me. Give me the Sonnenberg Flake Award. But we'll just have to see how it goes.
Well, Republicans got totally wiped out for a lot of offices, and so the bench is going to start being built now, and that's going to happen in the legislature. And so, watching legislators vote very closely to say, does this person deserve to be in Congress eventually, or does this person deserve to be the gubernatorial nominee? I look at records a lot more than rhetoric once campaign season happens. They'll throw anything up on a website that looks good to try to get conservatives. How are they voting year in and year out? And I think those are clear. You can look them up. I'm glad that other groups rate people. And that we're able to keep track of that.
Well, and Michael, that's where I think you guys, as somewhat of a newer player in town, I've promoted your site before. You guys do, I think, a very good job of keeping an eye on things because it's hard. Democrats have all kinds of, various billionaires funding various organizations that push things. The Republicans, not as much. And I know we've had conversations with lawmakers who've said, Democrats are already reaching out saying, here's what we're going to do. Okay, if you support us on this and give us some cover, us Democrats, will make this not quite as horrible as it otherwise would be. And I think the legislative leadership, the Republicans, are going to have a challenge trying to keep everybody in the fold. But I think that's where groups like yours, people can vote how they want, but I think that's let people, rather than at the end of the session and you're like, wait, what? What just happened here?
Yeah.
You guys can keep us aware and keep people focused and say, hey, everybody can vote how they want. You can support what you want, but just so you know, this is what's going on.
I think it was incredibly helpful for the fact that the two House members who voted for the red flag bill were lost, but they were publicized, right? They didn't just lose. Cole Wist and the other one were highly publicized of what they had done, and that keeps more people in line, quite frankly. Than a lot of other things. Giving awards out to the top ones, I think is great because that rewards people.
But that's after the fact, too.
Yeah, but we also have to recognize who are the ones that'll give them cover because, as a practical matter, they're going to have a tough time. And this is going to be what they basically want to do is skyrocket more or less your property taxes, and a lot that causes taxpayer revolts. And they don't want the taxpayer revolts, so they got to go, wait a minute, this is bipartisan. We had Joe Schmo from Jefferson County who said it was great, and it's a bipartisan measure. And
if they get one Republican, they're going to call it bipartisan, and that's why Republicans have to stick together. I think groups like us and other groups have to continue to educate people, because you're right, a lot of times things pass and people say, where did that come from? I didn't know anything about that. And the legislature passed it and the governor signed it and we got to live with it. And so groups like ours want to get out there and inform people along the way, write the op-eds, go on. I'm glad that you guys are covering this type of stuff. It's really important, especially when it has to do with our pocketbooks. So we're going to stay on it all through session and next session. And it has to be a all year round effort.
Yes,
right.
Yes,
Well,
point.
we're talking with Michael Fields from Colorado Rising Action. What kind of other things do you see? So obviously the Democrats have already said, we're going to go after Tabor and Gallagher and try to do end runs. They're not putting it that way, around them any way we can. We're hearing about, safe injection sites. We're hearing about red flag bills. We're hearing about getting rid of the death penalty. What other kinds of things do you, because I think, but right now, this is when lobbyists and people are lining their sponsors up for the bill. What kinds of things are you hearing are out there that we need to be focusing on?
I think you hit several of them. I think the red flags bill that comes back this year, I think one is going to pass, and it'll probably be more extreme than any one that we've seen so far. The death penalty, I think that's another one. I think energy, is a huge one that they just lost the 2,500-foot setback, but that is going to come back. Is that going to be 2,000 feet? Is it going to be 1,500 feet? Anything, healthcare related, obviously Jared Polis ultimately wants a single payer system. He needs money to do that, but they're going to try to find ways to put more power into the hands of government and in education too. I mean, I think school choice isn't something that's been popular in this state, but teachers unions are going to go after it as much as they can.
Their only problem
I think there's a lot of things out there.
Their only problem is Jared Polis hates them, which doesn't.
Well, I think, but I think that's going to be a difficult issue for the Democrats. Are going to have to figure that out.
Well, yeah, because as somebody pointed out, he holds grudges. And he's got a grudge against the teachers union, so it's going to be interesting to see how all that might be a.
But you're right; they're not going to say. They're probably unlikely to say, "Oh, let's just continue funding charter schools and letting people have school choice."
Well, that'll be an interesting one.
Well, with such a big majority in the state house, that's where you're going to see a lot of that, and that puts pressure on the Senate, to see what they do. Does Jared Polis sign some kind of compromise? I don't know. I mean, I think we're going to learn a lot early on of how much Governor Polis is going to push back on any of this stuff. I think we don't know, not having seen him in action yet. Is he going to say, hold on, guys, we got to have Coloradans with us on this, or are they just going to go full steam ahead? And I think it might depend on the issue. I think energy, I'm really concerned about energy and setbacks. And I'm worried about Tabor for sure.
Right.
Well, and as somebody pointed out, the worse the better, right? I mean, the worse the better. If you're ever going to become a majority again, the worse the better. You kind of go, I got them to slightly change. You kind of go, well, that's too bad. There's nothing better than the full enforcement of an awful law to get it changed.
And Michael, one other question. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, it's a time to show the contrast. It's not go along with these bad policies or make it a little bit better. It's to say, look, we have a different vision for this. We have the number one economy in the country. We want to keep it that way. Right. And X policy is not going to do that, and this is why. So I think this is a good opportunity to show those contrasts.
Let me ask you this, and you may not know this, but I was talking with a Democrat, Ted Trimp, a Democrat strategist, who right after the election was heading off to parts unknown, but I think on the West Coast, to talk about the Electoral College. And I kind of jokingly said to him, "Oh, you guys still trying to get rid of him?" He's like, "Oh, no, not get rid of it. We're just going to improve it." And I'm like, what? So that concerns me. Are you hearing anything?
They're trying to improve Tabor, too. That's what I call it. We're just going to improve it.
Improve heroin sites. They're just improving them. They're making them better for everybody.
Are you hearing anything on what they might be? Would that have to? My sense is that what they might be looking at is something going through states where the states, they don't get rid of the Electoral College, but states just say, hey, we'll just give our electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote. Have you heard anything?
Yeah, I haven't heard exactly. I think there's probably, for them, everything's on the table given the fact that what happened in the last election. I wouldn't be surprised if there's several examples of things that they could possibly do. I don't see that necessarily changing, but I think they're going to try as hard as they can to change the system to make it more beneficial for them.
Yeah, they'll pass a state amendment that Republicans can't vote.
Well, let me ask you the big hard question that everybody on the right is asking, and if you want to pun it, that's okay. I understand, but and Ted Trimpa, brought it up. He said the Republican Party of Colorado is never going to succeed until it decides what it wants to be. It cannot run where the donor class and all of the consultants who work for the donor class are never Trumpers, and 80 to 90% of the voters on the Republican side are very pro-Trump. He says you'll never get anywhere as long as that dichotomy exists. But people say, you're not going to change Phil Anschutz's mind. You're not going to change the Coors family's mind. They're never Trumpers, and they're going to pay their consultants who will be whatever they ask them to be. But that is the big problem with the Republican Party. And if Cory Gardner, Cory Gardner is viewed as, even with the $40 to $50 million he's got, as dead man walking, basically the most vulnerable senator in the whole United States. No, he's considered number one, along with Jones down in Alabama on the Democratic side.
Yeah, I think that there's an uphill battle for Cory given the outcome this year. I think it'll be an interesting race. There's so much that's going to be different 2 years from now. I don't know, what the economy will look like, what how far left the legislature and governor will go, and will that impact the elections? But I do think, in this year's election, it was clear that the base of the Republican Party loves Trump, right? It's over 80%, 85% that love Trump. But unaffiliated women in Jefferson County and in Arapahoe County don't like him. And so that's the dynamic that anybody running, especially statewide or in those counties specifically, has to deal with. And I don't think there's a clear answer, because you need both in order to win in Colorado. So I think that this is, going to be the issue that's going to be talked about for the next 2 years, especially for Cory Gardner or for anybody running in those areas, is how do you keep the base when especially unaffiliated women in the suburbs, polling shows they just don't like the president all that much.
The problem is the Republicans don't get out enough to register people, and therefore the Democrats do a great job of registering people.
Well, getting their ballots, not necessarily.
No, they register
them and get their
ballots. They go get their ballots and they identify them.
But
Republicans do
no
not.
doubt that the ground game, that's the left at the ground game, they do a good job of registering, talking to people all year round.
Yeah.
That's why we need conservative groups doing this all the time.
Yes, that's right.
Hey, well, listen, thank you once again, and
appreciate your thoughts.
Give us a call, because clearly you have the ear of the Colorado Supreme Court. So
I wish. Thanks for having me on.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Michael Fields there. I encourage everybody, Colorado Rising Action, check them out on Facebook and on Twitter. They do a real good job. They're doing some of the groundwork.